Hi. So we need to go over two things. First is we need to go over Section 2 and Section 3 of Econ. I wasn't there. Some people did it, some people didn't. So we need to look at what is a fixed cost, what is a variable cost, how do we figure out what the total cost equals, and then how do we compute the following things: fixed cost, variable costs, average total cost, and marginal cost. And you have to do this as a business so that you can see if you're going to make any money or if you're going to lose money. So there are 5 different kinds of costs that businesses have to deal with. There's fixed, variable, total, average total cost, and marginal cost. The fixed cost is a cost that doesn't change based on the amount of output. So that means if you make 1 or you make a million, the cost stays the same. And an example of this that's provided is like the monthly rent. So it's anything that a company would have contracted in advance, and then the numbers don't change. Variable costs, these are costs that change as output increases or decreases. So the example that's given is an employee's wage. So the more people that you have to hire to do more work, because that's going to have to happen, that means that you're going to be paying more out in payroll than you would have been otherwise. Your total cost is just taking your fixed cost and you add it with your variable costs. And whatever that equals to, that's your total cost. So it's FC plus VC equals TC. Then you've got your average total cost. This is where you take the total cost, which again you find out by adding FC and VC. And then you divide it by the quantity output. So if it's 1,000 units, it's whatever FC plus VC is divided by 1,000. If it's 1 unit, then it's divided by 1. Then you've got your marginal cost. This is the change in your total cost that's divided by the change in the quantity of output. What that means is it's essentially the same thing as TC divided by Q, but it's the change in it. So if I was going whatever my TC was divided by 1,000, that's my average total cost. Now if I go from 1,000 to 1,001, that means that my change in total cost is divided by the change in the quantity of output, which is just 1 now. So it goes from 1,000 to 1,001. Okay, and when you do that, if you look at those two numbers, the 1,000 and the 1,001, you can figure out what your marginal cost is. So the example that it provides is if your total cost was $6,000 and your quantity was 1,000, you would take 6,000 divided by 1,000, and then I'll give you your average total cost. Now to figure out your marginal cost though, if the numbers change from 6,008 because you've increased your quantity to 1,001, you take 6,008 and you divide it by 1,001 and you get 8. So it's just the difference of 1. Okay, so you look at what is the difference between the two. All right, so if that confuses you, what I want you to do is just look at this. So my total cost was 6,000 and now it's 6,008. Okay, and then my change in units is 1,000 to 1,001. So the difference between the two, I take 8, divide that by 1, and I get 8. It's just that simple. You just take the difference between those two numbers, those two sets of numbers. Okay, it's not complex at all. All right, moving on to Section 3, we're going to look at what's total revenue, what's marginal revenue, and then why do business firms compare marginal revenue with marginal cost when they decide like how many units they should produce. So marginal revenue, you take your change in total revenue and you divide that by the change in quantity, and that's going to be your marginal revenue. So there are 2 basic questions that any firm has to answer, and we've talked about these before, but first is how much do you produce, and then the second is what price do you charge. And remember, this ties into the previous chapter where if you're monopolistic competitive or a monopoly or the other 2 types of firms or business organizations, some people are price takers and some people are price seekers. And so this is answered in 2 parts. First is what kind of business are you, and then what kind of business organization do you belong to. So how much is a firm going to produce? So as long as MR, meaning marginal revenue, is greater than marginal cost, that's a signal to produce, and because you're going to make money. If your marginal cost, though, is greater than your marginal revenue, that means you should not produce anymore, because if you do, you're going to go into a loss, and that's not what any company wants to do. So every firm, regardless of what the firm is, has a singular goal, and that is to maximize profits. Now, how they go about doing that is done in different ways. Sometimes it can be by raising prices. Sometimes it's by cutting employees. There's lots of different ways, but the prime directive of any business is to maximize its profits. So if you look at like companies, we're not going to go through all 100, but like if you look at companies in the top 100 list and you see what their value is in the billions of dollars, Apple comes out on top. This number is wrong. It says 752 billion. Since this presentation or notes were taken, Apple has now exceeded $1 trillion. But Alphabet, they're the parent company of Google. They're worth more than $500 billion. Microsoft is $500 billion. Amazon is $500 billion. Berkshire Hathaway, that's that company that's owned by Warren Buffett. So Facebook, you can see them. So these companies, their value is very high. And how do they attain that level of value? Well, it's the quality of the product, that's for sure, but it's also because their board of directors seeks to maximize profits. So they make their decisions whether to cut employees, hire employees, buy back stock, buy other companies, like through mergers and acquisitions. All of these things are done with the intention of maximizing profits. All right, so how do we figure out if a company's making a profit or a loss? So you have to you take your TC, total cost, so that's your fixed cost plus your variable costs. Don't forget that. How do you figure out your TR? It's your just price times quantity. And so how do you figure out if you've got a profit or a loss? So if you take your TR, your total revenue, and you subtract it from your TC, your total cost, and the number is positive, that means you've made a profit. And if it's negative, it means you've made a loss. It's not that difficult. The thing of it is remember, in economics, if it's a loss, you don't write negative whatever the number is. You have to put it in brackets. If you don't do that, it's wrong. Okay, and because this is done in some sort of money, you have to put whatever the money value or whatever the money symbol is. So if it's dollars, euros, pesos, whatever. Next is how many workers should you hire? So there's this thing called the law of diminishing marginal returns, which is very much like the diminishing marginal utility. So it means that as you add more people, you're going to get less and less output from them. And there's going to be a point at which you reach more employees than they are making products to make you money. So that means that that person that you've hired is actually costing you money. So let's watch this video.
Hey Econ students, this is Jacob Clifford. Welcome to ACDC Econ. Today we're going to find out what happens when you keep adding more and more workers and the law of diminishing marginal returns. Guys, seriously, we don't all need to be here right now. In this video, we're looking at the relationship between inputs, the resources to produce things, and outputs, the things that producers make. For example, when a pizza company hires more workers, what happens to the number of pizzas they can produce? Before we jump into it, there's a few details we have to cover. First, keep in mind that there's two types of resources, fixed resources and variable resources. Fixed resources are fixed. They don't change as you produce more, like a pizza oven. If you produce one pizza or 500 pizzas, you still need that one oven. Variable resources do change with the more that you produce. So the more pizzas you make, the more workers, dough, and cheese you need. Okay, here we go. When you hire no workers, you get no output. But when you hire one worker, they have to do everything on their own. They can't specialize. Two workers can split up their work and produce a whole lot more together than any one of them could on their own. This shows the benefits of specialization, right? Two heads are better than one. In this case, two hands are better than one. But specialization has its limits. As you add more and more variable resources, eventually you're going to get less and less additional output. This is the idea of one of the most important concepts in economics, the law of diminishing marginal returns. As you continue to add variable resources to fixed resources, the additional output will eventually decrease. Notice that I said that it will eventually decrease. It can't increase because of specialization, but you keep hiring more and more workers, eventually you get less and less output. Here's some made-up numbers to help you understand the concept. Right here, this first column is number of inputs, in this case, workers. The second column is the number of output, the pizzas they can produce in 30 minutes. These numbers show the law of diminishing marginal returns, but it's easier to see them by calculating something called the marginal product. That's the additional output generated from hiring one additional worker. Okay, pause the video, see if you can calculate the marginal product on your own. When you're a jet, all the way from your first cigarette to your last dying day. The first worker can produce 5 pizzas, so the additional output they make is just those 5 pizzas. But when you hire 2 workers, they can produce 15. So the additional output from the second worker is an additional 10 pizzas. This shows the benefits of specialization. One worker can produce 5 pizzas on their own, but 2 workers can more than double that output. 3 workers can produce a total of 20 pizzas, but the additional output produced by that third worker is 5 pizzas. And of course, the fourth worker adds an additional 2 pizzas, and the fifth worker adds an additional 0. But now at the sixth worker, the total output actually falls. So the marginal product is -4. Now keep in mind, this is not because the workers are lazy or dumb. It's because of fixed resources. Okay, here's the question. With which worker does the law of diminishing marginal returns set in? I want to be in America. I want to be in America. I have to be in America. Now, it's not the sixth worker. It's the third worker. Notice the marginal product has been falling ever since the third worker. That's diminishing returns. It's not when it actually goes negative. That's negative returns, a completely different concept. Actually, there's 3 stages of returns. Right here is stage 1, where the marginal product is increasing because of specialization. Total product is increasing at an increasing rate. Right here is stage 2, because the marginal product is falling because of fixed resources and the law of diminishing marginal returns. Total product is increasing, but at a decreasing rate. Right here is stage 3, and the marginal product is negative, which means the total product is actually falling. This is because the workers are in each other's way, they're fumbling over each other, and there's just way too many cooks in the kitchen. Practical application round. It's important to keep in mind that we're talking about economic theory here. The numbers in real life are never as perfect as the textbook. But the idea of diminishing marginal returns is super important for anyone who just wants to run a business and figure out how many workers to hire, to a government official trying to figure out the best economic policy. Think of a farmer fertilizing their land, right? A little bit of fertilizer, that helps. More fertilizer maybe gives you a little bit more output, but you can't get more and more output from more and more fertilizer. In fact, eventually the more fertilizer you put, the less output you're going to get. The same idea might apply to the government. A little bit of environmental regulation might help the environment a whole lot. But more and more regulation will eventually do less and less additional benefit to the environment. Anyways, it's important to understand this is just not textbook stuff. This actually can help you make decisions in your life, all right? Thanks for watching. Till next time.
All right, so same idea here. You have 0 workers, you get 0 output, and that means you've got 0 units produced, duh, right? So if you have 1 worker, they can produce 5 of whatever it is that you're making per day. So you've got 5 minus 0 equals 5. If you double the number of workers to 2, you get 11 units produced each day. You've got 11 subtracted from 5 equals 6, so we've got 6 units. If you add a third employee, you've got 18, so you've got 18 minus 11. What I mean by that is you're going to take the amount right here, subtract it from this amount, and that's how you get 7. So when you add a fourth worker, you've got 23 units, so 23 subtract 18, that's 5. Notice this has gone down, this is a problem. You add a fifth worker, you've got 26 units, you take 26 minus 3 equals 3. Now, what that means, like Mr. Clifford said, is like, when you get past 3 workers and you add that fourth worker, there's less productivity happening. You're still making more output though, but the people aren't as efficient, okay? All right, and that's everything for that. So if you need help, let me know. Go do the work. I don't care if you have to print it out and take a picture of it and send it to me. If you've already got it done and you just forgot to turn it in, go ahead and do that. If you need to use DocHub to get the work done, that's fine. If you want to create your own Google Doc and do the work that way, that's fine. But I need this work. Okay, thanks.